My name is Emily Unruh. I'm an IB staff member at the Bethesda Global Center, and it is my distinct privilege and honor to introduce Daisy Khan. She is the Executive Director of the American Society for Muslim Advancement, as well as the founder of WISE. This is a program whose initiative she will be speaking to today in her presentation. And so, without further ado, we're going to get started. We're running a few minutes behind, so I want to give as much time to Daisy as possible. Can everyone give a round of applause as we start?
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And before I begin, I just want to thank one person who is responsible for inviting me here, and that's Paul Campbell. Wonderful man, and he's been conspiring for the last 1 year to get me over here, and I'm here, but I don't see him in the room. He did call me 2 minutes ago saying that you do know your session is at 2 o'clock, so many of you know Paul. Well, I'm going to be presenting, well, I don't know what happened to the PowerPoint now. There we go. I think I clicked the wrong button here. Sorry, technology stuff. So today we are, can you hear me? Is this good enough? How about that? Is that good? Okay. So today we will be speaking about imagining women being as leaders or at the front lines of change. But there are, I'm sure, some in the audience to whom this seems like an incoherent contradiction in terms and hard to imagine that Islam giving women a true sense of empowerment and responsibility. I frankly don't blame people for thinking that. When we see images of subjugation and honor killings and acid burnings, and recently that most atrocious thing that happened in Nigeria, kidnapping of girls and putting them into sex slavery. This is all because we have witnessed a rise in extremism and who have pretty much hijacked the public discourse in every aspect of Islamic thinking, religion, politics, and social issues. Women who had their rightful place in society are now subjugated and unable to fulfill their sense of purpose or to live a simple life of dignity. Extremists have filled the leadership vacuum, causing absolute confusion, and problems are solved only by finger pointing. Unfortunately, these are the images that have been shaping the public perception of Islam, Muslims, and women for the last couple of decades. But what if we were to just shut these images off? As if we were, many of you are teachers and educators and thinkers. What if we were to start on a clean slate? Maybe we should look at the last 1,400 years of images that have shaped certainly my view and the world of many Muslim women and Muslims that I know worldwide. Year 1658, the great Mughal emperor Shah Jahan ruled side by side with his queen or his empress, Mumtaz Mahal. In fact, he was so respectful of her and loved her so much, he built an entire monument in her honor, which is named also one of the wonders of the world. Many of you social studies teachers know that for a fact. Just in the last 30 years, we have seen 5 Muslim women heads of state who have been on the front lines, literally leading Muslim majority nations, from Bangladesh to Pakistan to Kosovo to Indonesia to Turkey. But this clashing of what is reality and what is perception came to a head for me personally because of 9/11. You all know that it changed the course of history. It certainly changed the course of history for me. I was married to an imam whose mosque was only the closest mosque to ground zero. When Americans became curious about Islam, explaining the status of Muslim women was ranked amongst the top frequently asked questions. And majority of people would say, "Why do you treat your women so badly?" And even though I would explain what I knew from my history, that women are entitled to the same God-given rights as male counterparts, my answers would simply fall on deaf ears. And they wanted me to explain how and why the faith of Islam was being manipulated to justify such outrages as female genital mutilation, child marriages, and most importantly, they wanted to know what I was doing about it. Frankly, how do I respond to this challenge when I'm simply an architectural designer? I was not trained for this work. I was minding my own business, and the only thing that I had was I was married to an imam. But then I realized, how should we respond today? All of us, collectively, I as an individual Muslim woman. But unfortunately, the public takes the news media at face value and paints the entire community with one brush. But this is not the answer, and we all know that. We need to understand that the actions of a few do not represent the entire community. And secondly, we can no longer afford to remain ignorant about the world's second largest religion. It is my hope that you will leave here today with a new approach for who Muslim women are and what they're capable of and the role that they can play if given a seat at the table. I know this firsthand. I was the third of 3 daughters. My earliest memory that I have is when I was only 2.5 years old. My father came up to me and gave me 2 shiny red boxing gloves with white laces and said to me, "Pow, pow, pow," or the Indian equivalent of dishum, dishum, dishum. When I asked my dad years later, because this memory was etched in my brains, whether he remembered giving me a pair of boxing gloves, and he immediately said yes. I said, "But why?" He said, "Because you were the third of 3 daughters, and if anybody tried to bully you, I wanted you to learn how to fight for yourself and to defend yourself." So this is the world that I came into. I was born in a place called Kashmir, India, which is also called the paradise on earth, which is at the foothills of the Himalayas. And I was empowered by all the men and the women in my family. And Rabbi Zidni Ilma, which is a verse out of the Quran, was etched in all the walls of the house. It means God increase my knowledge, or increase me in knowledge. It was the family motto and was written on every front cover of every book that I can think of. Education was so highly prized and considered a God-given right that I was sent abroad to New York City at the age of 16 to pursue a first-class education in the arts when I eventually led a 25-year-old successful career in architectural design. And the reason I was sent abroad was because there was no decent art school. And I was an artist and I painted, and they didn't think that I would have any ability to have any sort of decent noble profession. The only 2 noble professions for women were either teachers or doctors. And I didn't want to be either. And even though, as an architectural designer, I was a highly unlikely candidate to step in the front lines, I realized, if not me, then who? I'm an American, which de facto makes me the most powerful person, if I'm living in the most powerful country. I'm an empowered Muslim woman who's married to an imam, and if not me, then who? So I had to quit my career and step into the arena. And I realized if I did nothing, my reality as an empowered Muslim woman was going to become a minority view, and millions of women will be subjugated or continue to be subjugated, falsely accused of adultery, or be killed. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a collective fight. We cannot let the extremists define the global agenda for 1.6 billion people worldwide. We cannot allow them to consolidate power, as you are seeing all over the world, the mayhem that you're seeing because they have consolidated their power. We cannot allow them to spread influence and enable the subjugation of women. We Americans went to Afghanistan to free Afghan women from subjugation. We fought a war. We shed our blood. We tried it with our military might, and we tried it with drones. It didn't work. We tried it with sanctions, and we still have not destroyed these people. And we have not been able to stop their influence. And then, I guess in that moment, somewhere subliminally, I knew why my father had given me the boxing gloves. Somebody had to put on the boxing gloves. I believe that by women being in the forefront is our best chance of creating a counter momentum. And the best way to promote women's rights is to construct a religiously grounded argument to lift the truth of Islam, which has inspired Muslims for the last 1,400 years, and to create social change in the future worldwide. The historians in the room know very well that women's history is one history. Our challenge is one challenge. And we have been written out of history books repeatedly. And women of different nations and religions have seen both the emancipation and the restriction. Right here in America, not too far long ago, the great democracy of 100 years ago, women had no access to higher education, were unable to own property, open a bank account. When I tell these to young people, 60 years ago you couldn't own a bank account, they can't believe it. And we couldn't even vote. And it was devout Christian women, black and white, driven by their faith in a just God, that not only challenged inequality against women, but also the practice of slavery. The statement they issued at the first anti-slavery convention reads as follows: "The time has come for women to move in the sphere where God has assigned her, and no longer remain satisfied with the limits of corrupt custom and perverse application of Scripture that have encircled her." 100 years later, ladies and gentlemen, Muslim women could have written the statement about their situation right now. This is no different. But then, in year 6040, when Prophet Muhammad was receiving his revelation, God was sending him revelation, a woman who was by his side all the time, Nusayba bint Kaaba al-Ansari, noticed something very peculiar, that God was only addressing men in the scripture. So she went to Prophet Muhammad and said, "Why is God only addressing men in the Quran?" Prophet Muhammad really didn't have an answer because he didn't know. So he kept quiet. But her question reached the divine throne. It was so genuine, it actually went right to the ears of God. And a new revelation was sent shortly after that. And here's what the revelation reads: "Surely the submitting men and women, the believing men and women, the obeying men and women, the truthful men and women, the patient men and women, the humble men and women, the alms-giving men and women, the fasting men and women, the men and women who guard their chastity, and the men and women who remember God, for them God has prepared forgiveness and mighty reward." And this, ladies and gentlemen, validated women's equality in Islam, once and for all. So this faith-based activism is continuing with Muslim women today. And they represent 1/10 of humanity. 700 million Muslim women live in the world. We are strong. Many of them are at the forefront in service of their community. In 2006, I founded, right after the big question that was posed to me, what are you doing about it? I founded the first global Muslim women's faith-based movement called WISE, Women's Islamic Initiative in Spirituality and Equality. Sorry, I don't know. Well, the photograph didn't come up. There's a beautiful picture there of a couple of hundred women. We decided that it was important for us to create holistic change, that change was not going to come just with one bullet, that if we were going to have a sustained change, it had to be holistic. So we had to communicate our own story, we had to collaborate with one another globally, we had to interpret our text, and we had to do action on the ground. So in order to tell our own story, because we had been written out of the history books and everybody else was telling our story, we decided to create a website. It was shocking. There was not a single website dedicated to Muslim women. So we created a website called wisemuslimwomen.org. Sorry. This portal profiles Muslim women from 632 AD until today, and it's got an impressive research on Muslim women. It is used by a lot of gender studies students all over the colleges and universities, and it is an inspiration to many Muslim women. Especially, I remember I got a phone call from the ex-cultural minister of Saudi Arabia who said to me, "You've created a powerful tool here." He says, "We've been telling women they can't do this, they can't go in cars, they can't they can't be lawyers, they can't be this." He says, "Here you are showing that in 680 women did this, and 600 and 700, and they were empresses, and they were warriors, and they were rebels." And he said, "This is powerful because it's knowledge, it's the truth of our religion. So these are the issues that we list on here. If anybody is ever interested in knowing what Muslims think of these issues, all you have to do is go into any one of these issues and you will see all the research on it, including links and people. So we've spent an enormous amount of time doing this research for people, just because I believe education is power. And collaboration. We collaborate with one another. 200, 300 people come together, we share ideas, we learn from one another, and we increase each other's capacity, we become better leaders, we learn skill building trainings, we share knowledge with one another. And I remember once that one of our conferences, we also let a woman lead prayer for everybody else, just to show that women can be in a leadership role, especially for other women. So I remember that we had a woman who was a Quranic reciter. That's like being a cantor, you know. And a woman recited, and she was a master reciter. And we had these women from the Gulf and women from Northern Africa. They said, "This is not allowed." We said, "Well, who told you it's not allowed?" You know, people all over South Asia recite, but people in the Gulf don't. So this is another way of sort of showing the leveling field. Why is it that one thing is not permissible in one country and it's completely permissible in another country? What is it? Is it custom? Is it patriarchy? Is it tradition? It's certainly not Islamic. It's certainly not a scriptural, impediment. So this is another way that we educate people that what is happening in their own country may be just a simple custom or a tradition. It's really not Islamic. Then we also conduct polls. I was going to have you meet some wise women through a video, but it didn't work, so we'll have to forego that. We also do polls, instant polls, and this is what helps us to develop our own strategy. Our polling showed us that when we asked the biggest question, what is the biggest barrier to Muslim women's advancement, 74% of the women said harmful religious interpretation is the biggest barrier to women's advancement in their country. Then 92% said accurate media coverage of Muslim women is important or very important. And 98%, this was staggering, said that it's very important for women to take a leadership role in scriptural interpretation. And the women gave us authority, so we became very bold, and we took the next step. So we established our own council. It's called the Shura Council, which is very authentic, a council of 40 women that congregate from all countries simply through email and phone calls. And we listed the top 10, what I call the equivalent of the deadly sins against women, and we started doing research papers on these issues. Literally delving into our text and publish these papers on the most pressing issues so that not only would we women engage the text, but we would also show our opinion on these issues. And we use traditional methodologies, so we're not like a rebellious group that is just saying this is what we believe. We're actually using our scripture, our way of interpreting, using the Quran, the Prophet's example, operating under the framework of social justice, not simply jurisprudence. We use international laws and human rights norms. We use contemporary medical and social sciences evidence, which in classical times wasn't available, like DNA. Like, why can't you determine that this person was raped just by simply using DNA? Why do you have to wait for the witnesses? So we're very proud of the scholarship, and many people who have read our papers are simply shocked that this is done by a volunteer group of people. Which jurist has done this? Well, these are all the jurists right there. The 40 women all over the world have done this. So, and so what do we do with these papers? How do we educate the masses about these papers? And this is where our action comes in. So these are the papers. We've done a paper on domestic violence and violent extremism, female genital cutting, adoption and care of orphan children, women's leadership, and there is a new paper that has just been published on child marriage and forced marriage. So these are all the issues that you hear about in the world. And I remember we were going to do a paper on domestic violence, and the women around the room, you should have been in the room, you would have been very proud. One woman said, "Why are we only discussing women's issues? The violent extremism, terrorism is tearing all our societies apart. Why don't we go for the jugular? Because the men don't have the guts to do it. Let's do it. Because we don't have anything to lose and we have the most to gain. So we went for the jugular and actually combined domestic violence and violent extremism, and it's very interesting to actually see the links between the two. Those of you who are interested, it's available on the website. You can download it, read it, and we've tried to make it light, but it's also quite scholarly. So what do we do? Let's take the example of female genital cutting. When I first heard about this, when I started speaking and I started doing public speaking myself, somebody asked me the question, what about FGM in the audience? You're not going to believe this, but I said, what is that? I didn't even know that it existed. And the person said to me, female genital mutilation. I said, well, what? And then he was in a church, and he had his little, those days we didn't have iPhones, we had these little mini devices, and he had downloaded some stuff off of it, and he started reading this to me, and I said, well, I don't know anything about it because it doesn't happen in my country, certainly doesn't happen in South Asia. So I ran to my husband, Egyptian. I asked him, I said, where does it happen? He said, in Egypt and in Africa. I said, oh, really? I'm married to an Egyptian. Maybe I should ask my Egyptian husband what this is all about. So I ran to my husband, and he says, no, Daisy, this is an old custom. It's a carryover from pre-Islamic, this thing, and it happens, and has no basis in Islam. And I said, yeah, but it's still happening. And he says, well, if you want to do something about it. I said, well, what are you doing about it? He said, what are you doing about it? And I said, well, what am I going to do about it? And we went back and forth. He says, oh, go to Egypt and do something. That's what I did. This lady over there, I found out that it is banned in Egypt, but it's the practice has gone underground. So the people that are doing this practice is really barbers and midwives. And so Zainab Muhammad was one midwife, 70 years old, and she'd been doing this for almost 30 years now. And so I decided to find out how we could change the hearts and minds of these people. So I went to Zainab, and we had our paper. And we said, why do you do this? She said, oh, it's in the Quran. So we knew that was going to be the first thing. We said, no, it's not in the Quran, because we'd already done all our investigation. And I said, do you know that it's actually, you're not supposed to do it? She said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, there's a fatwa against it by the highest authority in Egypt. In Azhar, there's a fatwa issued against it. And we showed her the fatwa. She couldn't read it. She was illiterate. So, there was no point. But we explained it to her. Then I said, so why do you really do it? How much money do you make from this? She said £50 per girl. So we calculated she was making roughly $2,000 a year. And I said, do you like doing it? She says, oh, no, I don't like it because the girls are always screaming and yelling. And I said, do you know it's a sin? Now, a poor person only has one thing. They have faith. So it was very heavy on her. And I said, because you are mutilating the body of a girl, you are creating problems for them. And so she said, well, what should I do? I said, what if we gave you another business? We started another business for you. So we all of a sudden found ourselves in a little bit of a social enterprise, trying to create an alternative business. And so I said, what business do you want to start? She said, oh, I want to do, I come from a village where they raise chickens. We are specialists in chickens. So she has a poultry shop. And her poultry shop is the envy of the town. And she has since employed 2 boys and become a very staunch advocate against female genital mutilation. And then she said, oh, I'm not the only one. There's a barber over there, and there's that guy over there. So she's identified 17 people in the entire neighborhood who were doing this underground because she knows the whole crowd. So we started going from her, who became a champion. We went to another guy, the barber. We fixed his barber shop, gave him some money to fix his barber shop so his income increased. And then we went to another person who was doing this, and we gave him what they call in Egypt a tuk-tuk, which is these little rickshaws, and he started his rickshaw business. So each one of them, we have been taking them off of this business and alternating with another business. So this is a big video, but I just want to show you. This is her shop, and you see our little sign up there. This is the little village. She has the corner shop. Like, everybody's asking her, how did you get this corner shop? We invested in her, and these are her little boys in the back. And unfortunately, the sound doesn't work. But she kisses me in the end, and the one thing that she told me, she said, I can sleep at nights because now I don't have to worry about where my money's going to come from, and I don't have to worry about all those screaming girls. So she has been extremely thankful, and she calls her chickens organic chicken. She gave me one. I told her I can't take this on the plane. I'm not allowed to take it on the plane. So so then in Afghanistan, so that was female genital mutilation. So this is how we, we turned this research over to our network on the ground, because we have so many people on the ground. And another woman decided to take our research, and she crashed a party of imams and sheikhs. There was some conference of all these African imams who had come together in Gambia. She heard about it. She said, this is the perfect place to crash. So she had this thing in her hand, and it's we do these papers that are 30-page papers, but we also do a 2-pager, which is what I call pamphletized the information. So you have your talking points quickly. So you can't discuss 30 pages with somebody, but you can show somebody 2 pages very quickly. So she crashed the party, and she told the imams, and she's, herself an activist, and she said, can I please have your attention? And they're like, who are you? She said, well, I want to talk about something that's really important, female genital mutilation. I want to show you why it's un-Islamic. And they said, oh, you're telling us un-Islamic? We are the authorities. And she says, no, I just want to show you. I mean, at least tell me if I'm wrong. So she did it very respectfully, and they said, okay, so what's your argument? So she read the 2-pager back and forth. And she went through all the evidence and all the talking points. You know, it doesn't happen in Saudi Arabia. You think if it doesn't happen in Saudi Arabia, this is Islamic? It's the Holy Roman Empire. So that is shocking to people, you know? And so we use other countries as a way of, making our point stronger. So they looked at the document and said, this is truly very good scholarship, and you're right, and we've been wrong, and we're issuing a fatwa against it right now. So we were stunned at how easy it is to convince people when you use verse and scripture, and you can change the hearts and minds of people very quickly. So we have done a similar strategy in Afghanistan, where we actually go in and we take our research on the 5 rights that are very key in Afghanistan that you hear about: right of education, right of inheritance, because a lot of times women are not given their true inheritance, child and forced marriage. You always hear about the 60-year-old man getting married to a 10-year-old girl, property rights, just to even own property, and social mobility, because people can't venture out because they have to have somebody with them, mahram and all this other stuff. So we do the same thing. You can look at these imams on the right-hand side. You can see they're poring over our research and our documents. Oftentimes we find they're not even educated themselves. So they're learning new information. It's the first time they read this. Really? This is in the Quran? Really? We've been denying our girls education? Really? It's like shocking. I mean, you're talking about a country that has gone through a tremendous amount of war. So, there's no seminaries, so people just get appointed as imams, and then they tend to be uneducated. And we do another thing, we just weigh it very heavily on them, and we tell them you're responsible emissaries of God on this earth. So you have to lift your people, not to dominate your people. You have to tell the truth, because otherwise you're going to be accountable to God. So, no one wants to feel not only their burden, but the burden of their entire society. So, there was one imam, just to give you one testimonial, one imam who went through our training, and we had trained him on child marriage and forced marriage, and he went to conduct a marriage. I will not distract you with this right now. He went to conduct a marriage, and he saw I think a 18-year-old girl getting married to a 28-year-old man. It wasn't so bad, but she was weeping. He said, "Why are you crying?" She said, "Because I don't want to get married." He said, "Well, you mean you have not given your consent? Because one of the requirements of marriage is to give your consent." And so we drill this into the head of the imams. Consent is a necessary part of, conducting a marriage. So he said, "So you have not given your consent?" So he raised his voice again and again. "So you have not given your consent?" She says, "No, I've not given my consent. The girl has not given her consent. I cannot marry." So he was ready to walk out. And both sides of the family, the groom and the bride, tried to bribe him. And he says, "You think you can bribe me? I am answerable to God. Get lost." So he left. And another thing that we do with the imams is we give them a sermon on this issue, a tailor-made sermon starting in New York. It goes by email, goes to the local person. She translates into her local language. It's all stealth. I mean, I hope this video doesn't go too much viral. It's totally stealth. We are doing everything in the stealth way. No one even knows. There's no carrier. There's nobody. Everything is going by email. And it's being loaded up on the website, so people are downloading it in there. Then they're translating amongst themselves, and they're teaching these imams. So next day, he was so angry with what he had seen that he went and he gave a very passionate sermon in the mosque. And the people in the mosque were shocked at what they were hearing. They'd never heard this stuff before. So one of our student monitors saw an old man sitting there practically weeping, and he said, "Are you okay, sir?" He says, "No, I'm not." And this is the testimonial that you read. He said he was so disturbed that he held the collar of the imam like that, shook him, and said, "Why did you not tell us this before? No one can help me now. Time is gone. I have committed all sorts of violence against my daughters. I took the bride price for each of their marriage. I stopped them from getting education. I forced them into marriage. They're suffering every day because of my wrongdoing. For me, it's too late." And then the imam looked at him and said, "It's too late for you, but it's not too late for others. We have a new generation to bring up." And the person who's responsible for all this is this wonderful lady, Jamila Afghani. And she's shot in the leg. She's an Islamic scholar herself. She partners with us, so she's the one who's training the imams. When she first came with this idea to me, because she got this idea from another conference with another woman who had done this in the Philippines, I said, "Yeah, but this is Afghanistan and you're a woman. Are they going to listen to you?" She said, "No." I said, "So what are we going to do?" She said, "Well, I have a very nice husband." I said, "Why don't we train him and you make the tea in the back and you host them very nicely while he's doing the lecture, and that way at least we can start training them." That's exactly what happened. So for session after session, he had been completely trained by her. Then some imam asked a very tough question. He didn't have the answer because he's not the scholar. She studied Islamic law. So he said, "I think my wife over there, she has also studied Islamic law. Let's ask her if she has the answer." And then Jamila is very humble. She looks exactly like you see her in this picture, very respectful woman. She turned around, and it is said to me when she started speaking, the pearls of wisdom that came out of her mouth were like, the imams were like, their mouths were dropped. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. And then he said, "Well, actually, she's the one who's responsible for all the material that I'm training you with." And so now it is said that when Jamila walks in the room, all the imams get up out of deep respect for her. And then we always push her to try the next thing. We said, "Do women go to mosque there?" She said, "No, they're not allowed because they're told that they can't go to the mosque. The men will take them to heaven with them." So, of course, that is not true. So we, once again, we tried the same strategy. We told the imams, "Can you let the women come to the mosque?" And the first thing we hear is, "Oh, no, they're not supposed to." "Oh, really? Let's show you some images around the world of all the places that they go to the mosques." So we showed them images of Indonesia, which is a neighboring country. We showed them pictures of Turkey, which is an affiliate country because many Afghans are of Turkic origin. And they're shocked. They see these women praying everywhere, and they're like, "Why are we left behind? Why are we the ones who are preventing our women?" So we've created a section for women now, which is exploding, as you can imagine, because now the women are all coming to the mosque. So this way the women can hear directly and get knowledge and not only be inspired spiritually, but also get direct education from the imams, not to have to listen to their husbands. So to conclude, this is one of my favorite people. I have seen nothing but great things in Afghanistan. I have seen the imams are lifting the truth of Islam by refusing to conduct child marriages, making sure the women get their share of inheritance. There are so many testimonials, I can't even go through all those. So I want to leave us with a little bit of hope. I applaud these people for speaking out and for remaining optimistic and fighting oppression. And I believe that with educational and academic awareness, that we can create long-lasting change. As you know, education is a slow process. It doesn't happen overnight. So we've decided to have the long-term long-term view on educating people permanently so that the social change is long-lasting. It's not just a burst. So Bella Abzug, the feisty mayor of New York, reminded me that I am a great inheritor of the American suffrage movement. And she also told us that women were at the forefront of the suffrage movement, the peace movement, the civil rights movement, equal rights movement, the child care movement. And I bet you if she was here today, she would be supportive of a Muslim women's movement as well. And, you know, as a Muslim woman, I cannot let the extremists hijack the discourse on my religion, and we cannot remain on the front lines. Even young ladies who are 16 years old, like Malala Yousafzai, is stepping up and advocating for the right of education for women. And surely, if I can't do anything else, I will hand over my boxing gloves to her and to all my sisters around the world so they can fight for themselves. Thank you very much. And if you'd like to get involved, access information on Muslim women on the website that is listed here, wisemuslimwomen.org. If you are passionate about what's going on with Muslim women, you can follow us on Twitter, so you will hear all things about Muslim women. If you want to know what I'm up to, I only tweet important things, so you'll never see me, I'm cooking a dish, or, going to, shopping. You won't see that kind of stuff. If you want to, I am writing a book, a memoir, which will be published, I don't know when, but in the next few years. If you're interested to know or to use that as a material in your own context, if you're gender studies, inclined, you can reach me directly. My email is on here, and I will surely stay in touch with you. Or if you have any questions on any of these issues, not just women, but Islamic, you can certainly reach me directly. Questions?
Really quickly, I think what you did in the little villages where you helped them start their own businesses outside of the real reason that they were doing it is amazing. But a question that I had regarding that is there are clearly people who were bringing their dogs.
Oh, hold on one second. I was told that they're recording this and you need to use the mic for the question. So if anybody has any questions, if you don't mind stepping here so I can give you the mic and you can face the video. Thank you.
Oh my.
That's the most effective.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm just going to kind of step back and still look at you. Like I said, I think that what you did is amazing in helping them build their own businesses outside of FGM. But the question I have is there are clearly people in the villages who are bringing their daughters to these people for that purpose. And so, in a sense, you're taking away that opportunity for them. So what do the people who are bringing their daughters, what do those families do, or how do they respond to the people who, for several years before your organization came in and helped educate them? What did those families do then when this woman or that barber refuse to perform those actions? Are they then educated, or is that a major challenge?
So this actually happened in our village because, when the surrounding people started going to the practitioner, and the practitioner said, "I'm not doing that anymore because and there's a certificate on the board saying I'm not doing this anymore because it's un-Islamic, and that's what we taught them to say. So then the public is confused. What do you mean? We've been doing this for centuries. This can't be. So. Then we said, well, how do you create social change? And we read some polls that had been conducted in Egypt, and we found out that it is not the father who is insisting on it. It is not the mother who is insisting on it. It's actually the grandmother who's insisting on it. So we decided that it was important, and the father and the mother had to fall in line because there's a hierarchy in the family, and you have to really listen to the elders. And so if the grandmother insisted that the practice be done, and she's old-fashioned and she's got her own way of thinking. So then we studied foot binding. Remember years ago that in China, women used to have their feet bound and because their feet were considered to be beauty. How did that end? Who ended that? There was no NGO that went in there. So we found out that the way it happened was that there was sort of some awareness that was creeping in. And one of the most prominent social class families came out publicly and said that they were not going to bind their daughter. And then they were not going to bind their daughter, and they had found somebody else who would marry their daughter. So the whole reason why FGM is done is to ensure the marriageability of the daughter, so that she's chaste and untouched, and that kind of stuff. So we identified a couple of families. We said, "Are you willing to go public?" Because it's a small village, so there's no noble classes in this, But couple of families, so we paired them up with a boy's family and a girl's family, and we said, "Are you going to go public?" And they said yes. So the process was just beginning. Unfortunately, the revolution happened just around that time, because we were going to get a couple of prominent imams to come and do a whole sort of applauding the people. We were going to get a celebrity to come and applaud them, but the revolution just came in. Tahrir Square happened, and everything kind of stopped. So we haven't gone to that second stage yet. That's how we have to do it. Unfortunately, you have to come forward. I'm sorry about this.
Thank you for the work that you're doing. I really don't want to talk on this. My question was about Jamila, is that right? How many other villages, or I guess how widespread is this thing that's taking off, where these imams and elders and men are finally saying, well, wait a minute, women can be scholars? And, it sounded like such a remarkable change. How quickly is that spreading, and how open are they to that kind of change? And is she also meeting resistance? And this is a multifaceted question. And also, how does she network beyond, obviously she's connected with you, but in a more local sense, how does she network with others who may be like her, or who are going to be willing to receive this type of change? That's my, thank you.
So, very good question. I knew that we were going to drill down into this at some point. Basically, Jamila can't do this work all by herself. We are in a country that is so insecure, so unstable, and so unfriendly to women. At the political level, not at the people level. The people are very kind. Afghan people are very soft and gentle people, contrary to what we see, the hardened people, of course. But what we did was we knew that we had to work at different prongs. So first we got the Ministry of Women's Ministry on our side. We told them what we were doing, and we told them they cannot oppose us, that we are carrying out your work on your behalf. So you have to be on our side, because oftentimes some of the local NGOs butt heads with the government agencies, and the government agencies begin to resent them, because so we told them we are partnering when carrying out your work for you. So support us in the way that you can. Then we went to another ministry, which was even more important. We went to the Ministry of Religious Affairs, who have the names of all the mosques and all the imams. And we told them what we were doing, and we asked them if they could help us identify the imams by locality. So they're the ones who actually give us the names of each and every person. And that's how we get our group of 40 together. And we always go to the, what we call the storefront mosques. Not the big ones. We don't need the big ones, because the big ones are not that much of, But the imam from the big mosque usually comes, and he's like the heavyweight, because he's not going to stick around and be with the 40 people. So, so that's how we've been able to get these insulated from all these attacks. Number two, we do it so respectfully, and we do it with, it's almost like we look at these imams and we say they're like spiritual infants, like babies, like nursery school. And oh, look at what the Quran shows. So we don't disrespect them, disregard them. We let them talk amongst themselves. And so we've earned their respect. So when we earn the respect of the first 40, and in addition to just teaching them about this, we also tell them, what else do you need? We said, well, maybe you should do more public speaking. We should teach you how to speak publicly. So we started giving them training on public speaking. They became better speakers. Then they said, oh, can you also teach us how to speak to the media? Because sometimes the media come to us and we make fools of ourselves. We said, oh, no problem. We'll also media train you. So it's become a multi-layered thing. So they're constantly coming for more, just to Jamila, constantly asking for more information. And I constantly get emails from her saying, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? And I have to look for donors to, see if they can support this. So it's the first 40, then grew to 80, then another group of 40, and now we've trained 160. And look at what Jamila just said. This was literally like last week I got this email. In our third annual gathering of imams, we saw a remarkable change in the attitude of imams because of the educational awareness we have undertaken over the last 3 years. This time, when Egyptian and Indonesian scholars were talking about women's rights, Afghan imams added stronger arguments to the debate. In the past, Afghan imams, one way or the other, would come up with some negative attitude towards women, but this time around, all we heard from Afghan imams was positive comments. We also utilize the network of trained imams. That's the other thing we do, is we take them and we network them together. Network of trained imams to play an instrumental role to encourage women's political participation. And as you know, we have had remarkable women voter turnout, especially in the 8 provinces we worked with imams. We believe all the credit goes to Asma, our organization, who showed us the way to work with imams, who are the first problem makers for women's rights in Afghanistan. So I had a conversation with her. I said, women are not going to go vote if the imams don't encourage them, because their husbands are going to tell them to stay home. And so if the imams go in, because we already have women in the mosques, remember? Now, each of those women are going and telling their relatives, let's go. They're bonded together. They know that they have all the permissions from their husband, from their imams, from all the people to go and, cast their vote. And this is why there have been, record numbers of women coming out. I mean, I'm not totally responsible for it. I'm sure that other people have also done tremendous work in Afghanistan. But this is our effort. The women that would not have voted went out there and voted, and this is why we see record numbers. So I just hope nothing happens, because this poor woman, Jamila, she is wearing a prosthetic leg already. I mean, her child was almost killed one day by, because there was a bomb blast. So they are working under extreme conditions, and we have to really applaud them for it. Oh, one more unasked, and then, okay. Sure.
First of all, thank you so much. I think your message is beautiful, and I love what you said. Being in education and working with students and children, I know that parents are not always advocates for their own kids, and as teachers, sometimes we have to take on that role. Do you see this amazing message ever filtering into the education spectrum, just to kind of help in terms of allowing the students themselves to kind of become aware and educated about these issues as well?
So besides training the imams, we know that the other group of people that we cannot ignore are women in Afghanistan, but also the youth in Afghanistan. So what we did was we actually mapped out a local university, whichever might be the closest university in that area, and those are the student monitors. So the student monitors, number one, get training from us on everything. So they have to have an etiquette training on how to go and speak to people, how to enter a mosque, how to ask a question, because one of the things that we noticed was that people, the culture does not allow for a congregant to ask an imam a question publicly. It's just not done. It's just not good form. You don't do that. You don't get up in church and say, hello, priest, can I ask a question? So nobody was asking tough questions. Even if they disagreed, they just listened and didn't have the ability to communicate publicly. So the student monitors, students are students. They're kids. So what we did was we asked the students, why don't you spark the conversation and ask a tough question? So when the imam gave the sermon on the particular issue, inheritance, a young boy would get up and say, really? I didn't think my sister is allowed. Or I don't want, is really my sister gets a share of the inheritance? And the imam says, yes, absolutely she does. So then all of a sudden you see a little kid asking that question, and you see all these other people, older gentlemen, and everybody is starting to ask similar questions. So we use the student monitors to actually go in there and spark the conversation. But what's happening is the students are also responsible for distributing the booklets, which, what is being taught is actually turned into a little booklet which everybody gets to take home. So the student monitors are sitting there giving the booklets to people and saying, let me show you, my dear elder uncle, what is in the booklet. And so he flips it and he's learning in the process as well. We've heard phenomenal stories of young people who did not think that their sisters should go to school, who are now saying, I was wrong. Because it's usually the father and then the brother who insists that the sister not do this. So if you have your brother on your side, you can fight your father. But if you don't have your brother on your side and your father on your side, it's hopeless. So that's how we've been able to do it. Okay. Yes.
Another question I have for you. You mentioned a former minister of Saudi Arabia, and I've been very interested in Saudi Arabia for anywhere from 6 to 8 years now. I'm just doing research. And you said that he was recognizing these things that for several years they've said, no, you can't have an education. And he's saying, wow, based on your research, yes, they can. But I really wanted to hone in on the word former. So I wanted to know how much influence he had as a former minister, and if there has been any kind of real turnaround in Saudi Arabia with these papers that you've published and been able to distribute and inform someone who formerly had such a high position.
So this person is now in a very prominent position on a global scene, and I can't tell you where because he told me not to tell his name. But he has already contacted me, asked me if I could, work with them to basically do what we were doing and in a smaller scale in certain countries to actually go really global with this information. So I think that you will see, much more sort of penetration into different countries. Saudi Arabia is a complex country. It's a complex country for a series of reasons because there has been a division that has been made, an agreement of sorts between the House of Saud, which is responsible for the politics of the country and foreign affairs, and the clergy people who basically manage religion. But the deal that was made had one flaw in it, that when the deal was made, Abdul Aziz agreed to give the clergymen the education under them. And this is why Saudis have suffered over the years, because some of the clergymen are very harsh. They have outdated views on women. They tend to be extremist, very myopic. And that has not allowed the educational system to have critical thinking like you would have in other countries. So, and this is why they can also teach a certain brand of Islam, which tends to be very sort of inclusive, very inclusive, does not allow other opinions. They don't even think there are other interpretations. They've just been taught in a very sort of narrow-minded way. So, I don't know, I think we're going to need a Messiah, really, to come down to change Saudi Arabia. But the good news is there's a lot of stuff happening within Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of reformist thinking, a new generation that just is not willing to tolerate and the status quo. Many of them are educated abroad, they come back. And I know one young man who started a movement where he said, well, why can't women work in corporations? Why can't they work? So he started a very nice movement where he just went to a couple of corporations that were Western corporations and said, why aren't you hiring women? You're not Saudis. And they said, yeah, why aren't we? And so he challenged them, and before you knew it, some women went in there and started working there. And then he went to another corporation and said, you know, I have a sister who needs a job. Can you hire her? And she's qualified. She studied at University of Tufts and whatever. So they have been placing women in these corporations, and I think that the change is slow, very slow, but gradual, but it is happening. But I don't think that is where you're going to see all the change come from, because it's very slow and you still have all the clergymen that pretty much dictate how things should be. I will come to you. Senior privileges.
Do we have to be on this side in order to? Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Daisy, for everything that's happened, and I do want to say to this group that I was privileged to be at the very first WISE meeting, and so it's wonderful to see what's happened since then. But my question for you is, how can people who are not Muslims be the most helpful to your efforts? I would like to hear you just say a few words about ways of being supportive in ways that honor what you're doing and give the leadership that needs to be given to the Muslim women and to the Muslims themselves. But there, I know, are ways in which we can also be helpful, and I would love to hear you see what you have to say about that.
Thank you. I think that we need a lot of help on many fronts. But this particular group is a group of educators, and you are the shapers of minds. And there is nothing more valuable than education and being empowered with the right information. So to the extent that you can take the information that we are producing, and you can tell us, this is too complex for us, make it simple, and we'll do all the work for you, and distribute it amongst your students, or distribute it and talk amongst yourselves as teachers. It does not have to be distributed to students if that is not, the system doesn't allow it, or to talk to your friends about it. That's one way of doing it. That is easy for those of you who are in the position of informing others. The second way is to get involved in some measure, if you are financially able to say, I love this program that's happening in Afghanistan. I want to help with that. I know somebody who can facilitate or give money to that, and be a donor, and we can tell you what it costs and so on and so forth. That's another way. And then the third way is to simply try to get involved with us. We have enormous amount of students. Most of this research is done by non-Muslims that come to our office that work as interns for us. And the 3 months that they are with us in the summer months, they come back, the heads are exploded with information. And we had a young intern who was 18 years old. She came because her father knew me and she didn't know what she was going to do. And she said, I don't know, I think I'm interested in Israel and Palestine. I said, well, we don't focus so narrowly on Israel and Palestine, but we do focus on interfaith work. So she came to the office, and so I said, we've done a lot of interfaith work. Do you want to create a manual for interfaith work? How to do interfaith manual? And she said, sure. So I sent her all the information that I had for the last 15 years of how to do interfaith and created a manual. And then I said, now that you've done this manual, and the manual actually shows you the description of every religion. Like if you're talking to a Buddhist, and how many Buddhist branches are there, and how many Hindu branches are there, how many Sikh branches. Her head was like, she said, I came here to do Israel and Palestine. I can't believe this like world is like so huge. I said, and then I said, now I want you to take this, and I want you to create God's chart. So we actually did a God Inc. chart. The chart fell off the page because it was so huge. Here's God, and here are all these religions. When did they get revealed? What time frame did they come in? How many splits do they have? How many divisions do they have? I mean, Christianity, Joan. What is going on with Christianity? You think Islam is complex? I mean, I'm like, who are these people and what do they think? And then you can actually go into this, and you can go into that particular curious little denomination and know exactly how they think or what their belief is, which is different than this. So she did that, and then this year she contacted me and said, I've decided to go to Harvard Divinity School. I love religion. I'm so glad I'm not trapped in Israel and Palestine anymore. Because the whole world was Israel and Palestine. Her father is Muslim, and her stepfather's Muslim. Her biological father is a conservative Jewish man, and of course So interns, if you have people you want to do research, you can actually do the research online in your home. You don't have to come to us. You don't have to physically be with us. So that's another way that people can help. You may have ideas on how you want to help, so we're all open to that as well. Okay. They're not available on the website, but we can make it available if you need it, because it's really good educational material. It's great social studies material. It's religion, world's religions. If you think it's useful, we can turn it we can make it for you so that it becomes a useful guide for you. But also it's great because another thing that we did, which might be helpful to some of the theater people here, is we actually did a theater production called Same Difference, where we took 3 religions and we took the stereotypes that they have of one another. And then we theatrically talked about the stereotypes. What do we think of Jews? Jews think of Muslims as terrorists. The Muslims think of Jews as being greedy, and and then what do we think of Christians? We don't know. There's like no opinion on Christians, which is sad, but exactly. But I'm just saying that that we have a theater production that can be done in class, and it's done for schools. We did it in New York, and for 13 week, it was completely sold out, and actually 16 weeks it was sold out. So we wanted it to go into colleges and schools, so kids could actually learn, using the creative medium rather than, because they can't sit across a table and say, what do you believe or what do you not believe? And so that's another thing that you can get involved in. There are many ways to get involved. If you need anything from us, really all you have to do is ask. We are here at your disposal to make your task easy, but also, we have a goal, which is to educate as many people about the truth of, 1.6 billion people in the world. We just can't remain ignorant. And it's my hope that with this younger generation, we're already seeing a major shift. Like some of the younger interns that we have are already so well informed. They're so different than even the 20-year-olds. So you are raising this new generation of kids, and the more informed that they are about the world, the more helpful it will be to all of us. Question?
Go ahead. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Daisy, so much. This has been very motivational and inspirational. My question to you is, Jamila's story and the female genital mutilation story are very powerful. But when we saw the list of issues that women are facing today in the Muslim world, it's long and wide. So what's next? What are the next projects that you're working on? What are the next research materials that are coming up?
Well, I mean, I'm dreaming. I'm dreaming that in 10 years, we don't have to hear about these issues. It's a big, audacious dream. I mean, if we don't have to hear about another child marriage and another honor killing and acid throwing and, when I was growing up, none of these things existed. If they existed, it was one of those marginal things that happen in a family where there was a conflict. And so now we have an explosion of this. So, but I also think that women are very important. If women, women all over the world, and I wanted to show you a video, but unfortunately we couldn't, the wise women, how they were responsible for really starting the revolution. From Libya to Egypt, it was always, the first one was always a woman who stepped in and got into, started the mobilizing people. So I would like to see the initiative that we've created turn into the equivalent of a Beijing instead of 200 women coming together, because we don't represent 750 million Muslim women. Like there would be an annual convening that is an ongoing annual convening every year, and that we actually have chapters in different countries, real solid chapters with the most important women who are tied together. So one of the things we're looking in Afghanistan, for instance, is to bring the top 100 women together who can then become a force against these kinds of new fatwas that get issued or abuses against women. They can advocate collectively as a group to the ministry. And because that is power, when you have a collective voice. I remember when I started my initiative, I went to a Christian lady and I said, I want to do this. And she said, well, who are you? And I said, yeah, I'm nobody. She said, that's exactly. She said, yes, you're important. You're going to do a lot of things, but you need an institution. Because American women had learned that in order for you to be able to create any sustained change, you need an institutionalized voice that gets taken seriously. So individually, women can do amazing things, but if they are brought together as a collective, institutionalized voice, it has much more power. So I'd like to see that happen in different countries, at least the trouble spot countries, the big countries where there needs to be big impact, that we have these groups of women that, come together and are institutionalized, just like we created this WISE initiative. There's a lot to do, but with your help, I mean, you're at the World Bank, I'm sure that you can give us some ideas on how to expand. But, we'd love to hear from you. What do all of you think we should do? Okay, so here's a person that has an idea. It's okay. It's better to burst with ideas than not.
Just a quick disclaimer, I went to an all-women's college, so that kind of is the root. Yeah, so it's kind of, it's embedded now. But one idea, and it may be something that you've already taken, and it's certainly something that it doesn't matter what religion you are, everyone could really help with. Every year, the United Nations has a Commission on the Status of Women, and there have been several presenters that are not specifically seats in the United Nations or not even directly involved, but have been invited to speak. So depending on whatever the topic is or suggested topic, that's one way to get involved and make it global, because the United Nations is global. It touches 192 countries in the world. Another possible suggestion, my goodness, is from a religious perspective. I know that the Roman Catholic Church has a permanent seat in the council called the Holy See. And it has to kind of frame its viewpoints not from a religious perspective, but also gets its voice heard. And that might be something that, from a women's perspective, but also from really the Muslim community, could form a coalition that receives that honor of having a permanent seat, and then having its voice further heard in every council meeting in the United Nations because they do meet annually. And if one religious body can have a voice heard from one perspective, it makes no sense that another one cannot.
Before we can continue this discussion with Daisy, this is wonderful, but I do need to go ahead